So is this new Rugrats reboot faithful to the original series? Well, the babies still mispronounce certain words like Phil says impostable and Chuckie says aminals at one point. So that probably means my mom won't be too thrilled with the series, just like how she wasn't thrilled with the original series. Hey everybody, Bloodmoon Bobby here. Today, or I'm actually filming this video at night if you could believe that, I'm going to be talking about the very first episode of the Rugrats reboot on Paramount Plus, that is second time round. Now, for these kind of shows, for shows that aren't super continuity driven like Owl House or Infinity Train, I usually like to go over maybe the first couple episodes to get a taste of what's going on, and so that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm looking at second time round, which is the first episode of the new Rugrats reboot on Paramount Plus. It is the hour-long episode that was released on the day that this new reboot was released. And before I go into talking about this episode, I want to talk about my thoughts on the original Rugrats series, just for those who may not be familiar with my thoughts on the original Rugrats. And I would say that Rugrats still remains one of my favorite Nickelodeon shows. Definitely, I think, one of Nickelodeon's most creative shows. And it's pretty much up there with some of my favorite Nickelodeon shows, including Invader Zim, Rocko's Modern Life, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've got to see several episodes as a kid. I remember getting this VHS tape from my cousin, and it had several episodes that I got to watch, particularly from the modern era. And as a kid, I got to see all three of the Rugrats movies, including my personal favorite, the Rugrats movie, as well as Rugrats in Paris, as well as Rugrats Go Wild. I got to see some more episodes of the Rugrats into my teens and adult years, mainly on streaming services like Hulu before Paramount Plus launch. And so I think that I do have a pretty decent grasp of the original series. I've also gotten to see several episodes of All Grown Up as well. So that's my thoughts on the original series. How is this new reboot? Or specifically, how's the first episode of this reboot? And well, let's talk about what the episode's about. And so, second time round basically follows the return of the Rugrats, and we see that Chuckie really wants to be brave, and so Phil and Lil suggest that Chuckie does this in a game of Pirate It, a coffee shop where Chuckie has to eat this big bunch of mud, and while Chuckie does eat the mud, through this, he inadvertently eats half a worm. And when Angelica gets wind of this, she convinces Chuckie that he's got something called wormioleosis, and he's going to turn into a worm. And so basically, throughout the rest of the episode, the Rugrats think they got to figure out how are we going to stop Chuckie from turning into a worm. And so what do I personally think of this episode of the Rugrats reboot? I would say it does a really good job mixing the sort of classic tropes, characters, and style of story of the original Rugrats combined with a modern twist in terms of a new 3D CG style, which we'll get into in a second, and as well as setting the story in a more present-day setting. Like, you do see that the parents walk around with smartphones and make references to dating apps. I really mean dating apps and doorbell cams. And so in terms of what it does right in terms of the classic stuff, the story itself plays out like a good classic episode of the Rugrats. You got pretty much like lots of the good stuff. You got Chuckie being scared. You got Angelica convincing him and the babies that something horrible is going to happen into Chuckie. You got the babies using their imaginations to figure out this problem that they think that Chuckie is having. And many of the personalities of the characters remain very much intact. Tommy is still very much the brave baby. Chuckie is the frightened one. Phil and Lil are still gross. Angelica is still the bratty 3-year-old who likes to manipulate the babies and as well as the adults around her. And you got Susie, who's the more sensible child. So I'm really glad that many of this still works really well and plays out very faithfully. And speaking of Rugrats, it does it does use pop culture references really well. In fact, in the beginning of the episode actually starts out with this sort of imaginary fantasy adventure where the babies pretend that they're on this dinosaur adventure, and there's a lot of Jurassic Park references, like when this T-Rex is coming, and Chuckie sees that his like sippy cup is like shaking and the milk is shaking in a similar way to how the water cup in Jurassic Park was shaking. And when the dinosaur does come, Tommy holds out his hand to try to calm down the dinosaur in a similar way to how Chris Pratt was like, holding out his hand in Jurassic World. And we even see Phil and Lil go about in this like this clear ball, kind of like the one we see in Jurassic World. So I think it does a really good job with the pop culture references. And so, yeah, in terms of mixing together a lot of the classic ingredients of the original Rugrats series, I would say that this first episode lives up to the original Rugrats pretty well. But how about the modern things? Well, let's talk about the sort of elephant in the room, which is the 3D CG style that the reboot has. I know there's a lot of people out there who really don't like the 3D style of this new Rugrats reboot. Me personally, I will say that when I first saw it, it wasn't really up my street. But I mean that in terms of what is this kind of way, not in terms of this style looks horrible. Like, for me, I think personally that it's something that I grew to like, and it's something that I grew to accept me personally. It's not like a kind of animation style that kind of distracts from the story. I just kind of like took it in as a style that I was able to get into pretty decently. I think I would have preferred a animation style that sort of mixed like sort of 3D characters with some traditional elements here and there personally, but as is, I got used to the style of this Rugrats reboot, and if anything, it kind of reminds me of this Rugrats video game I used to play on my Nintendo GameCube called Rugrats Royal Ransom. So in a way, it kind of brings back memories. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily going after the style of that video game, but it just kind of reminded me of that. And in terms of the modern references, I get the sense some may think they're a little hammered in, but me personally, I think it works well with the story in terms of like mainly establishing that this Rugrats reboot is set in present day in order to make it more relatable to younger audiences or newcomers to the series. And as I mentioned, they do make references to things like smartphones. You see, especially the parents using their smartphones a lot. And there's a scene where Angelica's dad, Drew, is telling Grandpa Lou, why didn't you use that doorbell cam? And Grandpa Lou is like, well, I'm more of a face-to-face kind of guy. So they do make modern references, but I personally didn't find it too distracting. And in some scenes where it kind of plays more into the story, I think it kind of goes with the quirky style of the Rugrats. Like, there's literally a scene in where Angelica gets her hands on Grandpa Lou's dating app on his phone. I won't go into spoilers in terms of what happens because this occurs pretty later on in the episode, but I thought it was kind of funny, and it kind of played into the quirky style of the Rugrats. And so the adult characters, I think, are acted pretty well. They very much maintain the personalities of the characters they represent from the original series. The one character personality change that didn't really sit well with me, I think, was actually Grandpa Lou himself. I kind of felt that they sort of toned down his personality a bit, in the sense that he's no longer that super gruff and rowdy kind of grandpa character, at least not in this episode. That's not the impression that I got. Like, he still has episodes where he still has his moments where he gets into really tense situations, like, something that happens with like cookie batter that happens later on in the episode. But he speaks in like, a bit of a calmer, like, sort of voice. And even when he's like, freaking out when something bad is happening, I don't want to get too specific without spoiling the episode, it's still a little like too calm. I kind of I think I would have preferred if if the actor they got like spoken maybe like more of like a sort of like gruffer manner for Grandpa Lou, because what I liked about Grandpa Lou's like sort of like, you know, gruffer or personality is that it offered a lot more comedic energy. I remember there was this one episode of the original Rugrats where Grandpa Lou is like taking a nap in bed, and one of the babies like pulls on his uvula and like he's freaking out and and is like freaking out and doesn't understand what's going on. And so that's like, I think that's like the one acting decision where I was like, yeah, I think that's something that I prefer in the original Rugrats series. But overall, I would say that this first episode of the Rugrats reboot, second time round, does a really good job of mixing the story archetypes and characters of the original Rugrats series with a new 3D CG style and updating some elements to make the Rugrats fit more into present day. While the CG style isn't quite up my street, and I personally would have preferred to see some more like a bit more of a 2D style, like elements of a 2D style thrown in there, I still thought that this was a pretty nice comeback to the Rugrats, and I'm really glad that I got to check this episode out. So yeah, that's my review of the first Rugrats reboot episode, second time round. It's an hour-long episode that you could check out right now on Paramount Plus. Let me know your thoughts down below. Have you seen this episode? What do you personally think of this? Are you a fan of the new art style they got going on in this Rugrats reboot? What are some improvements you would like to see? If you have any suggestions, leave all those thoughts in the comments below. And until next time, this has been Blood Moon Bobby, and thank you all for watching. Hi everyone, thanks for watching this Blood Moon Bobby video. Like and share the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel to see more of my videos and ring the bell to be notified about my latest uploads. Don't forget to follow me on social media for my latest opinions and video updates. I hope to see you next time.